I've got to say, Tina, just in the last week, it feels as though there is a totally different atmosphere within the Democratic Party. A week ago, we were reading reports about how demotivated they are, feeling very nervous about the upcoming election. And now, just in the first couple of days, it feels as though the party is once again feeling mobilized, energized, the donations are flooding in again. Does that continue?
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, it's definitely more than a vibe shift when it comes to the Kamala's endorsement and being on the campaign trail. It's a data shift. And as you said, the donations are rolling in. The Democratic National Committee reported in the first 24 hours after Biden stepped aside that it had seen the highest take in donations, especially what are called small dollar donations in history. So this is game on.
Yeah. One thing that I think is interesting is the shift in tone as well. And now the Democrats are going out on the offensive about Trump's age. And of course, that was a big Republican point up until, the events of the last weekend. How likely is that argument likely to resonate? How likely is it to resonate with some of the voters in swing states? I mean, should we still be talking about age?
Well, recall that around 62% of American voters are what is referred to as double haters. They didn't want to vote for either candidate. And so the Trump campaign is now really on the back foot. It emerged from the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee last week, and we saw Harris there yesterday, thinking that it was going to sail to victory, having started to move ahead in the polls, which had remained pretty steady between Biden and Trump. Now it has a completely different ticket and needs to find a strategy fast.
Let me ask you to what extent you think foreign policy, and particularly the policy in the Middle East towards Israel, Gaza, is one that's going to resonate with voters. We know that a lot of the pro-Palestine vote has eroded. Some of the support for President Biden got eroded over the course of the last couple of months. How is that likely to influence the outcome of this elections, if at all?
Historically, as you know, foreign policy issues don't tend to move the needle very much on U.S. public opinion. But I was writing earlier this year about that feedback loop because the conflict in the Middle East and the White House's stance on supporting Israel so strongly definitely did engender some negative feedback. And what makes it worse, what made it worse for President Biden is that he was criticized both for his support for Israel by pro-Palestinian U.S. voters and for what was regarded as encouraging anti-Semitism, particularly in the U.S. campus protests by American Jewish voters. So it was really a lose-lose outcome. He expended a lot of political capital in his support of Israel and ended up really getting hammered from all sides. That's why I say Harris's stance is unclear.
Yeah, and that's the key. In a way, that's a strength because she's fresh and doesn't perhaps have the baggage that all of these other, lot more vocal politicians do suffer from. But I wonder, from your standpoint, you're a geopolitical analyst. What do you make of the potential for a President Harris in the future? How would that change the calculus of U.S.'s relations with its allies? Or is it just too early to say at this point? Because we know where Trump stands.
Well, that's right. So Trump is a known quantity. We have Netanyahu's visit. Perhaps we'll talk about that later. And Trump has said that he'll bring peace in the Middle East on day one, revive the Abraham Accords, same as he said with Ukraine. The calculus of the other actors in the Middle East, from the governments to the militias and the other forces, is also now on the back foot with the emergence of Harris. I think we should expect her to be a continuity candidate when it comes to foreign policy, but with the exception of such full-throated support for Israel, if that makes sense. Like any presidential ticket, it was balanced. Joe Biden had decades of foreign policy experience. Kamala Harris, coming from the state of California as a prosecutor with a strong background on criminal justice and also on women and equality issues, doesn't have that record in foreign policy. It would take time for her to develop that. But right now, if I were advising her, I would say to keep her powder dry.